In the year 1905, Portland hosted the Lewis and Clark Centennial Exposition, a grand fair celebrating a century since the explorers' journey. A centerpiece of this exposition was conceived, an enormous structure dedicated to the region's timber wealth. The Forestry Building rose as a testament to ambition, constructed primarily from giant logs. It reached dimensions of 206 feet in length, 102 feet in width, and soared to a height of 72 feet, akin to a 7-story building. Its creation utilized a full million board feet of lumber. The estimated cost at the time was around $30,000. Many of the colossal logs forming its core were specifically chosen from old-growth forests in nearby Columbia County, Oregon. Lumber baron Simon Benson oversaw their selection and acquisition. Architect Ian Lewis, representing the prominent Portland firm Whidden and Lewis, along with his assistant Albert Doyle, penned the design for the massive log edifice. Contemporaries often referred to it as the world's largest log cabin. Though technically second largest, it captured the public imagination. Some even called it the Parthenon of Oregon. Inside, the structure featured striking colonnades composed of 54 enormous, unpeeled Douglas fir trunks. Each trunk measured about 6 feet in diameter. Great care was taken during the felling and transport of these giants to preserve their natural bark. The logs supported a soaring 2-story central aisle, designed in a cruciform plan and illuminated from above by skylights. Architectural historian Henry Matthews noted the building's interior nave of unpeeled logs reached 48 feet high. He described it as a veritable cathedral of giant trees. During the exposition, the building housed exhibits detailing the forestry industry, showcasing local plants and animals, alongside displays related to Native American culture. It quickly became the exposition's most popular attraction, influencing public taste for rustic architecture on a grand scale. Subsequently, after the fair concluded, the city of Portland acquired the Forestry Building. For many years following, however, the structure suffered from neglect and fell into disrepair. Disaster nearly struck in 1914. A fire consumed the adjacent California building, sending burning embers onto the Forestry Building's roof. Prompt action by the fire department prevented the flames from taking hold. Throughout the 1920s, discussions arose about dismantling the building to salvage its valuable timber. The proposal, however, was ultimately rejected. Despite saving the structure from demolition, the state declined to fund necessary repairs. As events unfolded, the building deteriorated further, becoming a safety hazard. Eventually, it was closed off to the public. Another fire occurred in the late 1940s, ignited by sparks from a caretaker's stove, burning a significant hole in the roof. Finally, during the 1950s, a concerted effort emerged to save the landmark. The Chamber of Commerce successfully raised sufficient funds to commence restoration work. Soon, the building was largely returned to its earlier state. Reports mentioned it once again held a valuable collection of logging and lumbering exhibits, both historical and contemporary. On the evening of August 17, 1964, the caretaker secured the Forestry Building for the night. Within 45 minutes, neighbors began to notice signs of trouble. Fire had erupted within the massive log structure. When fire crews arrived, the blaze was already uncontrollable. Saving the building was deemed impossible from the outset. News reports stated nothing was salvaged from the interior. Investigations later determined the cause to be faulty electrical wiring, dating back to the original 1905 installation. Had the fire started just an hour earlier, the caretaker might have detected it in time to sound an alarm, possibly altering the outcome. The fire grew rapidly into a terrifying spectacle. People gathered from across Portland to witness the event. Eyewitnesses described flames reaching nearly 10 stories high. The intense blaze illuminated the night sky for miles, casting an orange glow over the neighborhood. Heat radiated fiercely from the inferno. Windows on the nearby Montgomery Park building shattered from the thermal stress, sending glass cascading to the street below. Ash, described as being the size of large snowflakes, drifted down within a mile of the site. That night marked the complete destruction of the grand Forestry Building. The era of the world's largest log cabin in Portland came to a definitive end. The morning after the fire revealed the complete loss of the structure. Where the massive log building had stood, only smoldering remnants remained. Portland residents awoke to the news, a profound sense of loss settling over the city. The Forestry Building had been more than just wood. It represented a unique connection to the region's heritage and the grandeur of the 1905 Exposition. As events unfolded, crews undertook the somber task of clearing the debris. The charred timbers and ash were removed, leaving the ground bare. Discussions immediately began regarding the future of the location. Many felt strongly that the spirit of the original building, celebrating forestry, should be honored. During this period, a determined group of citizens and industry leaders formed a new organization. Their goal was to create a modern center dedicated to forestry education and outreach. Fundraising efforts commenced, gaining momentum from the shared desire to replace the lost icon, albeit in a different form. A new vision took shape, one focused on contemporary understanding of forests and their importance. Subsequently, planning and construction moved forward on a different structure near the original location. In the year 1971, the World Forestry Center opened its doors. While distinct from its predecessor, it carried forward the educational mission born from the 1905 Exposition. The memory of the great log structure, however, endured. It lived on in historical accounts and the recollections of those who had experienced its vast, rustic interior, a symbol of Oregon's past. Throughout the era following the fire, the story of the Forestry Building became a staple of Portland lore. People recounted visits from childhood or shared stories passed down through families. Its scale remained legendary, the sheer size of the logs, the height of the interior space. It served as a benchmark for architectural ambition in the Pacific Northwest. As time passed, the exact location where the structure once stood became part of a developed urban park area, integrated into the grounds surrounding the newer World Forestry Center. The specific footprint faded into the landscape, yet the cultural significance persisted. Architectural historians continued to study the plans and accounts of Ian Lewis's design, recognizing its unique place in the development of rustic architecture. The tale of its construction, using massive, carefully preserved timbers, highlighted the region's deep ties to the timber industry and the vastness of the old-growth forests. Its sudden, fiery end served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of such heritage structures, particularly those constructed primarily of wood. The faulty wiring became a footnote signifying the challenges of preservation. Subsequently, the Forestry Building existed primarily in narrative and memory, a grand phantom of the Lewis and Clark Exposition, symbolizing an era of monumental construction and Portland's early 20th century aspirations. In the decades that followed 1964, the Forestry Building often served as a point of comparison whenever large-scale public projects were discussed in Portland. Its creation represented a certain boldness from an earlier time. The story of its near destruction in 1914, followed by decades of precarious survival and eventual restoration, only added layers to its legend. It highlighted the ongoing tension between development, preservation, and civic resources. Even without its physical presence, the building's conception spoke volumes about the early 20th century's relationship with natural resources, particularly the vast forests of the Pacific Northwest. It was both a celebration and a product of that resource extraction. Subsequently, the dramatic nature of its demise became part of the narrative. The intensity of the fire, the crowds who watched, the glowing sky, these elements cemented its place in collective memory not just as a building, but as an event. The very absence of the structure from the landscape became a historical marker. Its loss underscored the impermanence of even the most monumental creations. Throughout the era, the Forestry Building remained a powerful symbol of Portland's past, a lost giant built from the very trees that define the region, remembered through stories and historical accounts alone.